My name is Danny Rolleri. I'm the Director of Professional Learning for Culture and Climate in Sac City. A little brief context of my time in Sac City. I'm a student of Sac City, so I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school in Sac City. I was a teacher, assistant principal, and also principal, and now a district office administrator. So I have a huge passion for making change and for the work in Sac City and trying to, in my role, best influence how we're supporting our most marginalized youth with regard to culture and climate. So next slide, please, Ari. So yeah, Sac City, Kelvin. I'm gonna give you a little brief history of our connection with Kelvin and how it's grown and morphed, and how Kelvin itself has become it's being embraced, and the system is wrapping its arms around Kelvin with regard to, as Ari mentioned, formative assessment. I can't remember the vernacular you used a moment ago, Ari, but we do PDSA in Sac City, Plan, Do, Study, Act, and making meaning of getting voice from students in terms of from culture and climate lens. My biggest mechanism for providing meaningful change for the site leaders or entry points into this is that when I think of culture and climate, we are setting up the foundation for kids to come to school and have their thinking and learning brain activated. And then once that's activated in a positive way, then they are willing to consume the teaching and learning instruction that teachers are going to provide. And let's be honest, we're talking about adults too. We know adults have to have their thinking and acting, their teaching and learning brain activated as well. So that's the kind of perspective I come from when I'm looking at Kelvin, the statements we have in Kelvin, and how it's connected to the larger part of the system with regard to culture and climate. So next slide, please, Ari. Um, so this is a snapshot that some of you may remember or be familiar with COVID, and COVID in education. And at that time when COVID was happening, I was still a site principal at an elementary school. Shout out to Oak Ridge Elementary. I was there for 12 years. Much love and appreciation for the community, the staff, the students, and the families there. And in this image, it exudes a memory of the pickup line, the drive-through lane for passing out Chromebooks to students. Students cannot come on campus, so we had to have a drive-through lane for students to pick up a Chromebook. That was their device to log on for distance learning at home. And Kelvin was introduced as a mechanism to stay in touch with our kids. We weren't seeing them every day at school. And so, as Ari mentioned, Boogie, students would log on to the Chromebook for distance learning. Boogie pops up in the corner. There was 4 or 5 statements, I believe, just kind of like, how are you doing today? What are your needs? Anything going on you need to talk to an adult about? Students are going to respond. And if they respond positively, cool, we know how those kids were doing. If they didn't respond positively, there was a mechanism for us to receive that feedback and then do direct personal follow-up via phone or email or text to that family, trying to identify what the needs were. And also, if a kid didn't respond, then we knew after consecutive days, okay, this might be considered a kid that's just not coming to school. We need to reach out. So that was how we used Kelvin initially during the COVID times, as to kind of like navigate around not having kids at school and knowing how they're doing from a just overall, are they okay, mental health kind of perspective. Uh, Next slide, please, Ari. Thank you. And then I quickly transitioned shortly after COVID, 22-23 school year, into central office administrator. And one of the first tasks my boss gave me was I remember being at a meeting. It was like late August, early September, and we were talking about the common assessment schedule in Sac City for math, science, gate testing, SBAC, all these different things. And my boss said, Danny, Kelvin's yours. Figure it out, do something with it, and we need to get it rolling quickly. And I was like, okay, cool. And also was like, wow, how do I do this? But so I tried to quickly first just meet the task at need, the request from my boss. Um, but then as I started meeting with Justin, Ari from Kelvin, outside people who have a vested interest in surveys and assessments, I quickly got to realize the science behind forming powerful statements that's going to give you the feedback you are looking for to make change. It isn't just something where you just type in statements and just whatever. There was a science to it. And so then I slowly had to tell my boss, not going to be ready till October. Not going to be ready till January. Actually, not going to be ready till February, which is when we launched. But and going slow and not really worried about the execution of getting a task done, and allowed myself, the culture and climate team, partnering many meetings with the people I mentioned to identify the right initial statements to build a foundation. We really wanted this to be something from the lens of formative assessment. 3 times a year, we are getting authentic student feedback about the culture and climate of our campuses. We have to do this right. And so my boss was totally fine with moving it to February. And we launched in February of 2023. Initially, it was just 4 dimensions of well-being, safety, belonging, and anti-bias, anti-racist. Um, and then we did that February and one later on in May to give us a baseline of how it's working. Can kids access it? Are principals able to navigate the dashboard and look at the data? Because it was new with regard to formative assessment. And then the following year, we added some dimensions of gratitude, community circles, self-regulation, and recognition of emotions. And we added those because we were also launching this idea of 5 trauma-informed high leverage practices, which I'll come back to in a moment. But we wanted to say, these are the things, these 5 practices, self-regulation, recognition of emotions, community circles, um, gratitude, and predictability. These things should be happening daily in the classroom, to go back to what I said a moment ago about kids thinking and learning brain activated. And so then as we were launching that as a uh, common practice in Sac City, we also wanted to survey, is this actually happening? And we knew that Kelvin was the best way to see from kids' perspectives, are classrooms doing community circles? Is there predictability? How do kids talk about race at school? Those kind of things. And so when I mentioned a moment ago about the system embracing Kelvin, it's to the point now because of this work, and in my role, I don't supervise principals. I can only offer them the best advice, support, resources from my lens and where I sit in the system, but I'm able to present at monthly staff meetings for principals. And I've been able to dig deep into Kelvin, giving them all the resources they need to go back and lead a staff meeting looking at the data. Hey, here's a template of a slide deck. It gives you all the district data. All you have to do is go in on your end, plug in your site data. Here's some guiding questions that help do data talks. Here's some guiding questions that do data talks centering race, because we know race is part of those questions, and those are challenging conversations. Um, I've had one principal, a short story at a middle school, a really well achieving, academically thriving, great sports, and also they have racial disparity challenges at the school as well. And the principal, when they saw how their Black students were responding to the survey, they were not okay with it. They were very unsettled and they wanted to dig deeper. And that's the point, right? Is here's the district, Kelvin. Principal looks at the survey. Now they dig deeper. So then that principal went and did empathy interviews with a select group of Black African American students to get that face-to-face verbal feedback from the students. But they brought in an outside community partner to do that so that students still had a safe person to speak to, knowing that they weren't outing themselves for how they feel. And then the outside person navigated the data, provided the feedback and summary without identifying the students, where then that principal was able to then, okay, now I can take some action that's based upon the voice of the Black African American students, centering what they said from the Kelvin. So that's a nice little spotlight of how that's just one example of how sites are going about how to look at the data. We talk about student voice. In September, uh, we did our first Kelvin for this school year in the fall, and we got 17,000 responses. And at a principal meeting shortly thereafter, again, my one opportunity to kind of monthly touch point with them, and knowing that Kelvin is happening, I make it relevant and connected. We just did a survey for 2 to 3 weeks, and we got feedback from 17,000 students. What's our moral imperative? What's our obligation now to do something with that, or else students are going to want to take our surveys and give you feedback. And so part of that monthly opportunities for me is to give them, like I said, slide decks, um, resources, all the data that they need, have them have time to develop an action plan and talk about it with their colleagues. And then also another point about how Kelvin has grown in our system is that it's a part of our LCAP, so our local control accountability plan, our district accountability plan that has to go to the board, has to go to the county, has to go to the state. It's a part of that where now it's a metric under our goal of culture and climate and well-being and safety for families. And school sites are actually putting it in their school plans as well. So I'm proud of how it's grown and how it's morphed. Next slide, please, Ari. Now, not allowing Kelvin to live in isolation because it has to be connected to so many other things is we have a culture and climate framework that's brand new this year in Sac City. You see there the three themes in the middle. I forgot what those little things are called, the circles, the gears. Um, Anyways, you see the three gears there. Does anyone know the exact word for it?
The
Cog. Yes. Thank you, Ari. Cogs. Yes.
I got
Champion.
your back, Danny.
Thank you. And so the first one of knowledge and love itself, and then the second one, solidarity, and the third one is collective determination. And a little context in Sac City, we've had a huge foundation in SEL, and it has worked well. And we still see the same racial disparities with suspensions, chronic absenteeism. And so when I took over in this role, I felt like we need to decenter SEL, not get away with it, but decenter it because even with the best um, intentions, it's still not achieving where we want to go with disrupting those race-based outcomes. And so the idea of adopting a new framework that centers more humanity, anti-bias, anti-racism, um, trauma-informed practices, those three themes, each theme consists of 3 months and it's spread out over the year. And then we, meaning myself and my team of culture and climate folks, we provide curated lessons and resources for the system to then go and dig deeper around these themes that we feel are powerful and more centering on challenging the system and how it operates and thinks and behaves, so that way then we're truly meeting the needs of our most vulnerable um, students. So next slide, please, Ari, just a little deeper into what that looks like. And so you see here the image on the left is one resource for the month of December for grades 3 through 5. We break up our resources in grade bands of TK through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, and 9 through 12. And for the month of December, there's sub themes under the larger theme, which this one would have been solidarity. So it's each theme has a week: compassionate dialogue, embracing diversity, defining inclusion, and building connections. And as you can see, um, that's how December is broken up. But what we do is we provide lessons for compassionate dialogue that students can learn with their teacher. So teachers get lessons that they can click on. It's again an offering, and hopefully there isn't too much navigation for them to alter or tweak the lesson. It's just something that they can kind of teach with their kids to support this idea of compassionate dialogue, which is connected to solidarity. But we also know that adults need homework as well. We can't ask the kids to be an ally or be in solidarity with our community if the adults aren't doing it as well. So then we also offer for that same compassionate dialogue sub theme adult resources that's not for working with kids, it's working with themselves. And so these go out monthly along that grade span in terms of supporting the overarching culture and climate framework. Next slide, please, Ari. And then again, just bringing back what I mentioned a few slides ago about the community, about the high leverage practices. These are the 5 high leverage practices that we've identified. We've rolled out to the system, said, here you go, TK through 12, every classroom. These things should be happening consistently. It should just be there on the campus so kids are able to feel better connected, wanting to learn. And this is where we, 2 years ago, made these part of our Kelvin survey. And so I'm just trying to draw alignment and coherence to how Kelvin is kind of now morphed into bigger part of the system and not just an isolation of something that's not connected to what we're trying to do with teachers, principals, and the greater system as a whole. Next slide, please, Ari. So, uh, next steps. This is where it's exciting for me in my role right now because we've had two consecutive full school years of 21 statements, the same statements, haven't changed them at all, even though we've gotten feedback that's like, why are those statements this way? Can we do it like this? Can we do it like that? It's too long. And that's from different people, from students, from principals, from teachers. But we kept it the same because, again, in the spirit of trial and error, we have to build a foundation. And we didn't want to tweak anything without giving us at least a couple years. So now we're at a point there where it's like Kelvin 2.0. What comes next? Because we do have an opportunity to look at the data and analyze it. And we've already started to do that with a colleague of mine, Dr. Addison Duane, who I want to give a shout out to, who's a professor at Sac State. And her team have helped us along the way of our Kelvin journey. And what we're identifying, and I'm looking at my notes so I can say this correctly because I'm not a data analysis guru and I don't want to mess up the wording. But what she's telling us in a very statistical analysis of Kelvin is that um, the survey is working in terms of students understanding the statements and providing us their response. So how we have worded the statements, going back in the beginning to going slow, taking all that time to develop the most accurate statements from a science kind of lens, it's working. A majority of our statements, students are able to read it, understand what it means, and give us their response. That's what we want from the survey, correct? Is less ambiguity and less, what does that mean? They're giving us that. Now, there are a few statements that are a little bit perhaps challenging that we are going to go back and revisit and decide, do we need to enhance, or is it not something that's viable for us anymore and we can kind of drop? So that's the beauty of having the partnerships that I get to have, is that because that's not my field of expertise, but it's helpful feedback to know, okay, because we went slow, because we haven't changed, altered course, it's working. Now where can we enhance and make better? Um, Going back to those five trauma-informed practices at the elementary and secondary level, that there is a strong and positive related connection between the high leverage practices and student belonging, meaning the more those practices are in place and the students experience, the more they will report feelings of belonging and vice versa, which is what we want, correct? Yes, thank you, Ari. So going back to these, what the students are saying is when these things are consistently in place, I feel like I belong more at school. I feel more connected at school. And that is a huge data point for me to now take to the principals and to the system saying, hey, it's working. Our kids are telling us, if you do this, I will feel more belonged and want to come to school more. So that's a powerful, and that's both elementary and secondary. And like I said, there's a formula and data that speak to this. So it's backed up by valid analysis. Another one that I thought was really powerful, especially when you think about our current system that we live in, society, is that um, our secondary students, 7th through 12th grade, responded to like the statement of adults will take time to have honest and thoughtful conversations about race with us. We really were wondering, are adults taking time to have those conversations with kids? And it was strongly and positively related to students believing that adults at school care about them. And the kids are more connected when adults talk about race with students. That's what is our secondary kids are talking about. And so what I value in that is that race is always one of the hardest things to talk about as a society, but our kids thrive off it and are eager to lean into it if the adults are willing to lead them and guide them in those conversations, and they will feel more connected with adults at school. Like, wow, I can't wait to now consume that, take it back to the system to figure out what do we do with that now. So again, as I mentioned, that's kind of like the next steps, is looking at that feedback that I got from my colleague at Sac State, which statements aren't really working from the feedback. We want to lessen to maybe 15 or 16 and go deeper on some of them. So that way, then um, that's how it's going to launch into next year. Um, knowing that uh, we've had 2 solid years of students telling us what's working and what's not working from us. That's kind of my story. So that's all I have to share at the moment. And um, thank you for listening and providing me the opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Danny. And just to take a moment to reflect on the incredible things that you spoke to. Number one, I think the iterative piece over there is so powerful, which you ended on. And we're so excited, the Kelvin team, to be able to see that and walk that journey with you and learn from you all, especially doing this with so many students. But just jumping back over here, when we think about these practices, this, I think, is key, the key component to what folks are missing. Often we get folks who come and say, "What's next? What's that next step?" And it is about those daily practices. If you look over here, when I just look at these as someone who's been involved in the SEL school climate culture space for the last 8 to 10 years, is you can see if students are expressing gratitude on a daily basis, understanding and regulating their emotions, it's a predictable, engaging environment, where there's a sense of community. These things all lead not only from a science, but from a human perspective. These are things that we all need to thrive on. So I love this. I wanted to take a moment just to step back into the space and appreciate the work that you're all doing. And also just pass it over. I know Jimmy wanted to see if we've got any questions. Folks can unmute themselves. They can jump in. You can raise your hand if they would like to ask. Otherwise, I know the Kelvin team has a few questions that we'd like to give over to Danny. So, Jimmy, anything to add before we jump over to some questions?
Uh, no, we got a comment from Fran. Thank you. She says, very interesting data regarding belonging. Uh, thank you. And then some questions for you, Danny. How did you communicate Pulse about Pulse in such a at such a big district? So you want folks to take a data survey. How do you encourage them? How do you get the word out with the Kelvin product? What was your plan?
That's a great question, Jimmy. And that was part of the initial stall in the beginning, just being very transparent, is it isn't something that I could just quickly just say, here we go, everyone, do it. There was a process in Sac City for and it takes time as in large districts. So like the first thing we did is we had to obviously inform the families of Sac City that this was going to happen. So I had to work on a letter, and I got templates from I can't remember who it was from, maybe Ari, Justin, folks at Kelvin. I said, hey, here's a template we use in other districts. Had to customize it for Sac City purposes. Um, had to get that approved by my boss when she knew this was coming out from a communications lens. Had to then also get it translated into 5 major languages in Sac City. And then we had to then send it to the print shop. So that way, then when it was delivered to the sites to go home in backpacks, they had the right number of English, Spanish, Hmong for each um, site. That was at least like a 2 week process because we only have 1 or 2 people in the print shop. And so it's not like something they can just, complete overnight. That's just getting the paper backpack version home. Then I had to work with the communications department to send a mass email, comms through whatever we use Parent Square now. Back then it was Infinite Campus email to the families because we wanted to make sure families have the opportunity to opt out. So families had to be informed, then they had the opportunity to opt out if they didn't want it. So we had to schedule that prior to the Kelvin. So that was the family communication piece, I guess you could say, as best I could, using the normal means of text, email, phone call to families, paperback, paper in the backpack. Um, then when it came to the principals, I had to develop a singular Google Doc that had all the necessary information from a principal. So here's what it is, here are the dates, here's some slides that show, excuse me, how to administer it, um, when I'm going to send you participation rate updates. Um, and then we sent out that slide. Uh, we had like a teacher version because it was new to teachers, so I could email teachers as well. Hey, teachers, here's what's going to be happening with Kelvin. Here's the 3 slide decks you need to administer it. One of the things that we did is sorry, don't take us the wrong way. We kind of eliminated boogie from it because from our secondary lens, if a site was doing it, I didn't want kids to log on in first period, third period, and fifth period, take it 3 times. So we had to remove boogie and just have them log on and have it be part of their when students go on to Chromebook, just automatically there's a Kelvin sign, hit Kelvin, take the test. So there was a lot of front loading of heavy information. I'm sure the system got tired of me saying Kelvin, all the Kelvin emails, all the Kelvin resources. But it's gotten to the point where, like today, we're in the middle of our spring window for our last window this year. And I sent out last night participation rates for the current window. After a week, here's where you're at. I already got emails from principals. Thanks for the update. Can you send me this again? Can you do this? So it's something now that I think the system again is just it's there. So that's kind of a long version of a lot of a lot of thoughtful communication had to go into place as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you're very intentional about getting the message out, and the results are you have high participation,
Yeah.
then you have good data
Yeah.
because you're getting the voice of more students, not just, a small percentage. So
Yeah.
congratulations on that. We hear stories all the time about how districts, get the word out, and it is important to do that. Otherwise, that it doesn't make an importance of that data. And you're really hit something in what you were talking about earlier is you have a moral obligation to do something about that data. You got to tie that loop because otherwise you've just wasted everybody's time, right? And so commit just want to say congratulations, commend you for doing that extra effort to do the survey outreach. Another question we have is once those results come in, how are you sharing the results to the district? Do the principals get it? Do teachers get it? What's the dissemination of the data?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. It's a weird dynamic I'm living in, and I'll share why. So because it's to me it's sensitive information, right? It's student feedback. It's not a math assessment. It's not a writing exam. It's formative. That's the power of it. And when you think of a formative assessment, we want educators to lean in by grade level, student by student. Where are the challenges? How can I help and individualize and customize? But we're talking about students opening up and being vulnerable and providing their feedback. There is a level of security that I am protective of the students. Not forgive me for saying this because I hope this wouldn't happen, but it is not retaliatory. It's not weaponized now to say, oh, this is what you think about me, especially when you look at providing heat maps. That if you have a classroom only have 2 Black kids and you see the Black African American responses are very low, well, chances are they know which kid it is that said that, right? So I start at the highest level, just principals, and I make it very clear to them, teachers don't have access to the Kelvin dashboard in terms of because there is on the Kelvin dashboard the opportunity to look how students responded. I don't promote that to our principals even because I'm really sensitive to let's just look at it from the heat map lens. What are the patterns? What are the trends? Because I think when you get into that student feedback, you get feelings, you get emotions, and it's hard for I think adults sometimes to separate and just live in the world of, hey, the data is telling us a story. Let's lean into that and make sense of that without having to make it be something that who said it and that's missing the point, right? So we in our, I have a spreadsheet that gives the principals the participation rates, and we created a Google folder for each site where initially we are starting to help after each window happens, we dump into their folder the PDFs of the heat maps from by statement, by dimension, by grade level, by race. So that way then principals can easily then just pull that up and look at it and take it back to their staff and say, what do you notice? What do you look? What do you see here? But that's a great question because it's something I'm wrestling with because I know I can make heat maps by teacher, but I don't know if the system is ready yet. That's a whole level of teaching and training and getting adults to be okay with the uncomfortable of maybe not getting the feedback that you think that you should deserve from students in your class, and that's okay. You
Yeah,
know, it's not nothing that should be used poorly.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Uh, do you got time for a couple more? There's
sure. Yeah,
more questions. So how have students responded to Kelvin surveys? What is their
you know
sentiment about just surveys in general?
that is,
Kelvin.
I would say overall the feedback I've gotten is kids don't like surveys in general, especially
Hmm.
on this stuff, on feedback on how the culture and climate, because and here's the key part, because nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
So my voice doesn't matter. You asked for my opinion, nothing came of it. So why should I do this survey? It's just more of, and I've gotten that from very, um, we have a board of education, obviously each district does, and we have a student board member who I love, a junior in high school, and at a board meeting, she's said this. It's like, it's too long of a survey. Uh, I do it, nothing changes on the campus. So, why should we do that? I had another student a few years ago told me directly that to my face at a middle school age, and they said, "If you really want to know how I feel, just ask me. Just come talk to me, ask me. I'll tell you how I feel." And so, I think that's the part that, again, in my role, the best I can do is only influence and provide those offerings, suggestions, recommendations. But I think where there are sites happening where they actually do take action and do something and communicate it to the students and to the families and to the staff, this is directly related to your feedback, is where we will probably, I would say, see more um, participation, engagement with it. But when you ask students to take a survey and then they don't, there's no engagement to it or no connection back to it, then why? What's the point? So I think it's that's probably maybe something common that you all are hearing, and as a rhetoric around surveys, and students feeling like, looks great, sounds great, but in theory, if there's no action, then why should I do this anymore?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with tying that loop with the data with the students and then getting them involved in some of the solutions. And not only that, but having smaller, more formative assessments versus giant assessment near the end of the year that's 70 some odd questions that the kids will never see the results of that. So having that cadence of surveys, taking action when you can, and letting the students know that it's a direct result from their voice. I think that will keep that momentum going for the survey cycles. And everybody's survey fatigued out
Yeah,
there with, you get your car repaired or, you get surveys of going to dinner, anything. So, keeping them short, simple, and then having action is the key to that. One last thing, if you don't mind, are
sure.
there any success stories you'd like to share in closing?
Yeah, that I really lean on that one that I mentioned about the middle school. Um, that was something that I truly appreciated, was and because it's a middle school that, again, is thriving. It's one of our models of success in our district with regard to just, like I said, the academic achievement, the accolades that it gets and it deserves. And beneath the surface, there may be some challenges that exist in that. And the site leader, once they saw that feedback, they immediately went to, this is a problem. Our African American students are not a significant part of our student population in terms of numbers, right? But they're making up, but their feedback is the highest on the not positive side. So how do we make sense of that? If, like, what do we do? And so the fact that the site leader chose to dive headstrong into that and made it a mission. And like I mentioned, luckily I have partners that are willing to kind of come in and did the empathy interviews. And I was able to see the results and look at the feedback, and it's powerful. And now that then the site leader was able to make action of that, like that's what you want. And because, going back to earlier, the idea of customizing it, correct? It makes it local and real for that school now. And now for those students to feel like the site leader listened and did something with regard to how we responded and wants to like learn better from our voices, like that's that loophole. Now continue to do that at the site, and then Black African American students' experiences hopefully will increase and feel better. And I firmly believe that once you elevate one portion of the student group of a school, it'll elevate all in terms of being narrow and focused. Because sometimes you could water things down by trying to reach all students versus let me lean into the most challenging feedback that's there and see an opportunity, a growth point, and find a success. And once that can happen, oh, this can apply in every and other spaces.
Wow.
Amazing. Ari, did you have another question?
Yeah. Great. I mean, Danny, this is so real, so raw. It's fantastic to be able to learn from you. And I think just to take a moment to celebrate the fact that you get such high participation and engagement is you guys, I know surveying space is not simple, not easy, but you're doing something right. So yeah. To you, Justin, the team over there, Justin, of course, being on the Kelvin team and your incredible team, Edison, we're really privileged to work with you all. A last question from um, that we had is, let's take a moment to just imagine a blank slate over here. You're coming from Kelvin, you've just got the tool. And you mentioned that you were using Calvin for some accountability, the LCAP in California. Out here, we call our accountability assessment the LCAP. That's linked to funding and a whole, you probably, if you're familiar with it, you can think about the priority 6, which you'd seem like you're measuring around school climate and culture, all those good things. And then you've also got, these very targeted type of surveys looking at demographics and specifics of, how to engage students. And again, if you were taking a blank slate, what's one piece of advice kind of you'd give a district of where to start? Where would you start maybe? What's that piece of advice? Would you start with the accountability and go top down? Would you start with potentially, something very targeted and show the students that this makes change? Where would you kind of position yourself? Or maybe there's a different option which I'm not getting at.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I really think back to kind of what I mentioned in the story when I became a central office leader is um, going slow to go fast. It really, because I was new in the central office, I knew where I wanted to go, but I didn't have a sense yet of how the system operates or how things are all interconnected, because we don't want to live in isolation. And so taking my time to then say, okay, how can this culture and climate, student voice survey, Kelvin, be connected to the LCAP? Where can principals connect it to their site plan? Where can principals um, see opportunities to then do something at a staff meeting? How do we help teachers implement the survey? All those things of going slow and taking stock, and then seeing I definitely, we did start small and narrow, like I mentioned, just 4 dimensions, 13 statements. But then over time, once we did that, it was easier for it to grow and people to be, I would say, accepting and find ownership of it because we were thoughtful and slow in the beginning and we didn't force it down someone and say, you have to do this. It was like organically embraced because of that formative lens too, because we didn't have a formative student voice survey in Sac City prior to this. We only have a one time a year summative assessment that's connected to our LCAP. And I think that really helped. That would be the one thing I do as a blank slate is just, I'm glad we did it that way. I actually foresee if we would have done the opposite and if I would have rushed it, there was no way I would be at the place I'm at right now. with regard to being able to be here today, sharing the successes that we've had in Sac City because of how we rolled it out. Yeah, and I'm looking at the chat, and yeah, thank you, Justin. It's been an amazing team. It's been so many people, and I want to give major, major kudos to Justin. He's a text, an email away with, hey, with this or that. And so it definitely has been a huge lift and effort by several people to get to the place where we're at in Sac City.
Fantastic. Wow. Very inspiring, Danny.
Yeah.
Seriously, we
Thank
deeply appreciate the work that you're doing. I want to just open it up. If anyone else has a question for Danny while we end off, please feel free to unmute yourself. We would love to hear from you all. We know we got some engaged participants over here, and we just want to thank you all for being here. But yeah, let's take the moment. If anyone wants to add in or say anything, please feel free to unmute yourself now. We'll wait those awkward 15 seconds now of silence, and we'll see if anyone wants to jump in.
I'm happy to jump in and say the results that you got are just so informative in terms of action steps. And I'm curious if those programs are homegrown programs, because at the high school level, student voice is key. Your representative to the board has said that.
Yeah.
They want to be heard, and what's the point of taking surveys if you can't show them that now you're responding to what they need?
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Going back to Ari's question a moment ago, I probably would have been more inclusive of students in the beginning and community partners, but it was just like, okay, it's like that idea of we adults think we know what's best for kids, so let's just go ahead and plan it, and then they'll love it. And
No.
then the feedback I'm getting after 2 years is like, okay, so next year moving forward, Kelvin 2.0 in Sac City, it's going to be, hey, we've enhanced these statements. My time over the summer, should involve reaching out to our student advisory committee, which is a district-led advisory committee of students that are in high school, and saying, hey, what do you all think about this? Now we want to do this and give them that critical feedback because they'll tell us how it is, which I appreciate and love. That's them showing us like that's their love language, right? Is being honest. And so yeah, that is something that and I think also connected to that is, you talk about homegrown and kind of like I was looking at the data point comment that you put in, Fran, in the chat, and making it real and central to what we're doing in Sac City as well, I think has been helpful. I wish those 5 trauma-informed practices, we're actually launching an MTSS framework in Sac City with, and we have common assurances, academic common assurances, which are tier 1. These are all the things that should be happening from a teaching lens, assessment lens, curriculum lens. On the culture and climate lens, is the high leverage practices. And that's something that's going to be, slowly rolling out into our system. So now a leverage point in our system is that those high leverage practices are going to be things that are going to be defined as a common assurance in Sac City for our MTSS framework. So now that's part of Kelvin. So, you see the layering there but it's, again, it's something that's Sac City-fied. It's what we're doing. It's what we're identifying. And we have the capacity, ability, and the wisdom in-house to build it up and make meaning of it, which is something that I'm proud of the educators at Sac City that are working on it and doing it. And I've seen it in classrooms, and it's powerful, amazing to witness and see because it is slowly growing, I feel, and being embraced.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fran from Autonomy, our good friend over here at Kelvin. So we appreciate you jumping in. I think that concludes our time over here today. Very quickly, if you want to connect with the Kelvin team, partnerships at kelvin.education, feel free to reach out to us. I've sent in the chat our slides from today, so you can also access those. If you'd like to reach out, please feel free. And once again, from the Kelvin team, we are so grateful to work with Danny. The work that you do in Sac City is inspirational. We are so grateful for your time today, for your partnership, for your thought leadership. And we look forward to many more engaging talks and presentations and learning together. So Danny has also very generously left his email in the chat for anyone to connect. Of course, the recording will be available of this, and we're going to post that out. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all. From myself, the Kelvin team, have the most incredible day, and we'll see you all soon.
Bye, everyone. Have a great
Thank
day.
you, Danny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.